The first alien beam did not destroy the human colony. It disappeared into it. High above the dead mining world of Karen 9, Warlord Draven stood inside the command spine of the Dominion execution ship and watched his planet cracker strike the surface with enough force to split continents. Every officer on his bridge expected the usual result. White fire, expanding crust fractures, oceans of molten stone, and one more silent human ruin erased from the map of conquest. Instead, the beam touched the gray planet, sank into the dust, and left nothing behind but a thin ring of blue light spreading across the surface like a waking eye. For the first time in 300 years of Dominion expansion, no one on the bridge spoke. Karen 9 had been classified as abandoned. Its cities were hollow. Its orbital docks were frozen. Its atmosphere carried only ash, iron dust, and the faint chemical ghosts of old human industry. The Dominion had found no fleet, no defense grid, no life signs larger than buried bacteria. To Draven, it had looked like proof that humanity's age had ended in silence, leaving behind only metals to harvest and symbols to mock. That was why he had chosen this world for the first demonstration. A dead human colony would teach the surrounding systems that even ghosts belong to the Dominion. Then the planet answered. Across the surface, mountains shifted in lines too straight to be natural. Old mining scars filled with light. Entire valleys opened like sealed doors beneath centuries of dust. The scanners screamed as dormant energy signatures ignited from pole to pole. Not one generator, not one hidden bunker, but a planetary network so vast it had been mistaken for geology. The bridge crew stared as their conquest map rewrote itself in real time, turning from gray terrain into thousands of red warning markers. "Sensor error," Draven said, because pride needed the words before fear could enter. His science officer did not look away from the display. "No, Warlord. The planet absorbed the strike. That is impossible." "It did not block it," the officer whispered. "It stored it." The blue ring reached the equator and stopped. A transmission burst from the planet on every frequency at once, cutting through Dominion encryption, military firewalls, and command priority channels as if they were children's locks. The voice that emerged was not alive. It was young, cracked by age, and wrapped in static. A human child, recorded long ago, speaking with the calm terror of someone leaving a message for the future. "If you are hearing this, then someone touched the sleeping worlds." Draven felt the air change around him. Not physically, something worse. The certainty on his bridge began to rot. The child's voice continued. "Please leave before the adults wake up." Beneath Karen 9, something massive turned. Not a weapon powering on. Not a city rising. The entire planet adjusted its orbit by a fraction of a degree, deliberately, precisely, like a giant shifting its shoulder after centuries of pretending to be stone. Then every dead human satellite around the world rotated toward the Dominion fleet at the same time. Warlord Draven did not order a retreat because conquerors did not retreat from ruins, and the Dominion did not become the largest predatory empire on the Orion Arm by fearing dead machinery. He stood frozen beneath the red glow of the bridge alarms, his claws locked behind his back, his golden command mantle hanging perfectly over armor polished for victory ceremonies. Every instinct in him demanded immediate violence, but something about the silent satellites held his voice in place. They had not fired. They had not moved beyond that single synchronized turn. They simply watched. The Dominion fleet hung above Karen 9 in a formation designed to terrify living worlds. 12 execution cruisers formed the outer crescent, each armed with siege lances capable of boiling oceans. Behind them waited 3 harvest carriers, their bellies full of machines built to strip continents into usable ore. The flagship, Sovereign Hunger, remained at the center like a black spear pointed at the planet's heart. It had broken rebellions, erased border colonies, and carried Draven through 27 victories. Yet now, against an empty mining world, its bridge felt smaller than it should have. "Identify the weapons," Draven commanded. His tactical officer dragged trembling fingers across the display. "Unknown configuration. The satellites are not drawing enough power for conventional attack systems." "Then why are they targeting us?" "They may not be targeting us, Warlord." Draven turned slowly. "Explain." The officer swallowed. "Their alignment is too precise. They are facing our ships, but their optical arrays are not locked onto our hulls. They appear to be looking through us." That answer angered Draven more than fear would have. The Dominion believed in clean hierarchies: predator and prey, master and resource, threat and submission. Nothing looked through a Dominion war fleet unless it had already decided the fleet was not the most important thing in the room. The child's transmission repeated once, softer this time, then died into static. "Please leave before the adults wake up." No translation algorithm could make it less insulting. Human younglings were supposed to cry in ruins, not issue warnings from beneath dead planets. Draven ordered the recording isolated, decrypted, and traced. Within seconds, the communications officer stiffened. "Warlord, the transmission is not from Karen 9's surface." "Then where?" The officer's crest flattened against his skull. "Everywhere. It is being repeated by objects across the system. Derelict or haulers, frozen relay towers, abandoned habitat shells, even debris fields. They are all broadcasting the same message with different time delays." Draven stepped toward the main display. Karen 9's system had looked dead when they entered it. A burned-out human mining network. One of dozens found along the silent frontier. For 80 cycles, Dominion scouts had mapped these abandoned places and laughed at them. Human expansion had once worried the older empires, but that fear had faded when humanity withdrew from diplomacy, closed its borders, and finally vanished from known trade routes. Their stations went quiet. Their colonies stopped answering. Their fleets, if they had ever truly existed, disappeared like mist under sunlight. The Dominion had called it collapse. Now, as hundreds of broken human machines whispered the same warning from the dark, Draven wondered whether collapse had been too convenient a word. "Scan historical records," he said. "All human ruins within Dominion reach. Find matching symbols, signals, power traces, anything." The science officer obeyed, feeding decades of conquest data into the tactical archive. Images spilled across the bridge screen. Dead stations around red dwarfs, abandoned farms beneath cracked domes, mining rigs buried in asteroid belts, forgotten navigation buoys coated in ice. The Dominion had passed through all of them. They had stripped some, ignored others, marked most as harmless. Then the computer began highlighting details no one had cared to study. A carved circle inside a maintenance shaft. 3 vertical lines burned into an airlock door. A spiral of small metal plates embedded beneath a landing pad. A child's handprint etched into alloy beside words no Dominion linguist had bothered to translate. The same pattern appeared again and again. Not decoration, not memorials, markers. The science officer's voice dropped. "Warlord, these signs are present in every human site we have cataloged." Draven felt irritation sharpen into something colder. Why was this not reported? They were classified as cultural remnants. And now, the officer enlarged one image. A circular warning symbol surrounded by old human script. The translation engine struggled, corrected itself, then displayed a sentence that made the entire bridge go still. "Do not wake what we buried for your sake." No one laughed. Dominion officers laughed at weaker species, at failed rebellions, at desperate messages recorded before extinction. They did not laugh at warnings that had been sitting under their claws for years, waiting to become relevant. Draven looked back at Karen 9. The blue ring had faded, but the planet no longer seemed dead. The open valleys glowed faintly from within, like covered furnaces breathing under ash. Dominion scans still showed no biological population, no cities filled with frightened civilians, no human soldiers preparing a defense. That should have comforted him. Instead, the absence became the most frightening detail of all. If no one was alive down there, then who had decided not to fire? A new alarm sounded, lower than the first. "Report!" Draven snapped. "Outer picket ship, Vorn's Mercy has lost engine control." On the display, one of the smaller escort vessels drifted out of formation, not damaged, not attacked, but gently pulled by an invisible gravitational hand. Its captain appeared on a side channel, mandibles twitching with panic. "Sovereign Hunger, our systems are operational, but the ship is refusing navigation input. We are being moved." "By what?" The answer came before the captain could speak. Karen 9's largest moon, previously catalogued as a dead iron rock, shed its outer crust in 6 long strips. Beneath the surface was not stone, but black geometric machinery arranged in rings. The moon did not fire. It simply turned, and the captured picket ship was placed carefully into a new orbital path, far from the planet and far from the fleet, like a weapon being removed from a child's hand. Draven's tactical officer whispered, "It could have crushed them." "Yes," the science officer said. "It chose not to." That choice struck the bridge harder than an attack. Dominion doctrine understood destruction. It understood submission. It understood the language of overwhelming force. But restraint from a superior position was alien to them, and that made it unreadable. A weapon that killed could be countered. A weapon that waited had intentions. Draven opened a command channel to every ship. "All vessels, maintain formation. Charge secondary lances. Do not fire without my order." The moment he said it, every screen on the bridge went black. For 3 seconds, the flagship of the Dominion execution fleet belonged to something else. Then a single line of human text appeared across every display, translated perfectly into Dominion command language. "Hostility recorded. Intent uncertain. Observation continues." The screens returned. No systems were damaged. No weapons had been disabled. No crew member had been harmed. The message had entered, spoken, and left without resistance, proving that every locked door aboard the Sovereign Hunger had only ever been locked from the inside. Draven realized then that the human machines were not waking because they had been attacked. They were waking because they were judging whether the Dominion deserved to survive the next mistake. The Dominion fleet remained above Karen 9 for 17 minutes without firing, and those 17 minutes humiliated Warlord Draven more deeply than any battlefield defeat. His ships were armed, his crews were disciplined, his orders were still law, yet every vessel held position like prey frozen beneath the gaze of something it could not see. The dead human satellites kept watching. The moon machine kept turning in slow silence. The captured picket ship remained alive but isolated, its captain reporting that every weapon aboard had been placed into maintenance lockout by a system that did not exist in Dominion architecture. Draven wanted to call it cowardice. He wanted to name the hesitation as caution, strategy, discipline, anything that did not taste like fear. But the bridge had changed. Officers checked their displays too often. Security crews stood closer to emergency exits. The tactical staff no longer spoke in proud certainties. They whispered around numbers they could not explain. Then the heartbeat began. It came first as a faint pulse on the deep spectrum scanners, one clean wave of energy rolling outward from Karen 9, crossing the fleet, and vanishing into the dark. It carried no destructive force. It did not interfere with shields or engines. It simply passed through hulls, bodies, armor, and bone. A second pulse followed 8 seconds later. Then another, each one stronger, each one too regular to be geological and too calm to be an alarm. "Source," Draven demanded. The science officer's eyes reflected the pulsing scanner light. "Not a single source, Warlord. The entire planet is emitting it." "What does it do?" "I do not know." That answer was becoming intolerable. The heartbeat spread beyond Karen 9. Derelict or haulers in distant orbits began answering with weaker pulses of their own. Frozen relay towers lit one by one along the outer system. Ancient cargo containers, dust-coated navigation buoys, and shattered habitat rings all joined the rhythm, not chaotically, but in sequence. A dead system became a nervous system. The Dominion had not entered ruins. It had entered a body. Draven ordered a withdrawal to the system's edge, not as retreat, but as repositioning. He used that word loudly, so every officer heard it. The fleet obeyed, engines flaring in disciplined formation. But as the ships turned away from the planet, the heartbeat followed them. The pulses did not chase. They anticipated. Each wave reached the exact place the fleet would occupy before the ships arrived there, as if Karen 9 had already calculated their fear. Halfway to the outer belt, the first old human station moved. It was a cylindrical refinery, officially dead for 4 centuries, its hull cracked and its reactor cold. Dominion survey teams had walked through it 2 years earlier and found only empty crew quarters, collapsed storage bays, and walls covered in faded human warning marks. Now it rotated on broken maneuvering rings, aligning its shattered docking ports toward the fleet. Lights appeared inside its windows, not steady power, but brief flickers that passed from deck to deck, like someone walking through rooms with a lantern. The communications officer spoke without turning. "It is transmitting. Block it." "We are trying." The transmission opened anyway. This time, there was no child's voice. There was only a countdown, spoken by thousands of layered human recordings in different ages, accents, and emotional states. Some voices were calm, some were terrified, some sounded angry enough to burn worlds. Together they counted backward in an ancient human language the translator could not fully process. The numbers appeared on the main display. 9 minutes and 59 seconds. Draven felt the bridge inhale. "Countdown to what?" he asked. No one answered. He ordered the refinery destroyed. The nearest cruiser fired a precision lance, and for one glorious instant the Dominion returned to a language it understood. The beam tore across the dark, struck the human station, and should have reduced it to vapor. Instead, the refinery folded inward, not exploded, folded. Its metal skin collapsed into a smaller, denser shape, absorbing the lance the way the planet had absorbed the planet cracker. The ruined cylinder compressed into a black sphere no larger than a war shuttle, perfectly smooth, perfectly silent. Then it vanished from sensors. The cruiser that had fired lost power. No blast, no impact, no visible counterattack. One moment, the vessel burned with reactor light. The next, it drifted cold. Every system shut down except life support. Its captain's emergency signal came through full of static and restrained panic. "We are alive. Weapons disabled. Engines disabled. Message on all internal screens." Draven leaned closer. "Read it." The captain hesitated. "It says, 'First correction applied.'" The countdown continued. 8 minutes and 41 seconds. A younger version of Draven would have ordered every ship to fire at once. That was what Dominion commanders did when confronted by uncertainty. They converted mystery into debris. But the pattern was now too clear to ignore. Every act of violence was not weakening the human machines. It was teaching them, or worse. It was moving the Dominion down a list of permitted responses. The science officer confirmed it with shaking restraint. "Warlord, The earlier message said observation continues. After the cruiser fired, the system used the word correction. It may be escalating according to our behavior. Then stop behaving like prey, Draven snarled. Yet even as he said it, a new thought entered the bridge and settled there like poison. If this was escalation, then what had Karen 9 considered the first planet cracker strike? A mistake? A warning event? A test? At the system's outer belt, the fleet found the next impossibility. The asteroids were arranged wrong. From a distance, they looked natural. Irregular stones, ice fragments, metallic bodies drifting through old gravitational scars. But as the fleet approached, long-range scans revealed spacing too precise to be random. Each asteroid held the same distance from 6 others. Each rotated at a mathematically controlled rate. Each contained a hollow center lined with inactive machinery. There were millions of them, spread across the belt in a pattern larger than any fortress the Dominion had ever built. The tactical officer spoke the thought no one wanted to form. This is not a mining system. The countdown reached 7 minutes. Deep inside the belt, something answered the human voices. A single beam of pale light rose from one asteroid, then another, then 10,000 more, connecting the rocks with thin lines until the belt became a glowing web around the fleet's exit path. It did not block hyperspace. It did something subtler. It showed them that hyperspace routes had been mapped, measured, and quietly owned long before the Dominion arrived. The navigation officer turned from his console with a face gone gray. Our jump vectors are being predicted. Jammed. No, Warlord. Allowed. That word struck harder than jammed. Jammed meant resistance. Allowed meant permission. The countdown reached 5 minutes. Draven opened a direct line to Dominion High Command, intending to report hostile human infrastructure and request immediate reinforcement. The signal left the flagship, crossed 3 relay layers, and returned before it should have reached the nearest military node. On the main screen appeared not High Command, but a map of Dominion space. Red markers glowed over fleet bases, shipyards, fuel depots, noble estates, and slave processing worlds. The information was too detailed, too current, too intimate. Then a human message typed itself beneath the map. We know where you live. We have not come there yet. The bridge became so quiet that Draven could hear the soft clicking of his own claws against his armor. For the first time, he understood that Karen 9 was not defending itself. It was demonstrating range. The abandoned station, the sleeping moon, the weaponized belt, the stolen communication path, all of it formed a sentence the Dominion had been too arrogant to read. You are not discovering humanity. Humanity has been watching you arrive. The countdown reached 3 minutes. Draven's pride fought for one last foothold. He had not conquered half the frontier by accepting fear as counsel. The Dominion respected only strength, and if humanity's dead machines wished to judge him, then he would show them something worth judging. He ordered all ships to form a spearhead toward the nearest stable jump corridor. If the human system wanted to allow escape, he would take it. If it wanted to deny escape, he would force the answer into the open. The fleet moved. The glowing asteroid web did not attack. It rearranged. Stones shifted aside in perfect silence, opening a corridor through the belt. It was wide enough for every Dominion vessel. Clean, safe, almost inviting. The navigation officer looked back at Draven. They are giving us a path out. The countdown reached 1 minute. No one celebrated, because at the far end of the corridor, an object waited where no object had been before. It was small compared to a warship, no larger than an escape craft, smooth and white against the black. Its surface bore no weapons, no engines, no visible seams, only one human symbol painted across its hull. The same circle and 3 vertical lines found on every ruin. The translator finally decoded the symbol. Witness marker. The object transmitted one final message as the countdown reached 10 seconds. Permission request delivered. Draven stared at the words. Delivered to whom? The countdown hit 0. Every human machine in the system went dark at once. And somewhere far beyond Karen 9, in a place Dominion sensors could not reach, something answered yes. The yes did not arrive as a word. It arrived as absence. Every Dominion scanner aboard the Sovereign Hunger went blind at the same instant, not because the human machines had attacked, but because the universe around the fleet briefly stopped admitting that the Dominion existed. Stars vanished from the displays. Navigation points dissolved into static. Distance markers collapsed into meaningless symbols. For 3 impossible seconds, Warlord Draven's fleet hung inside a perfect black sphere with no reference, no direction, no outside, and no escape. Then reality returned with a quiet chime from the tactical console. A new line of human text appeared across the main display. Restraint protocol reduced to 70%. No one moved. Draven had seen officers remain calm while their ships burned. He had watched captains smile as they ordered rebellions erased. He had stood in victory chambers filled with the recordings of defeated worlds begging for mercy, and had felt nothing but satisfaction. Yet the number on the screen did what screams and explosions could not. It made every creature on his bridge understand that the terror they had witnessed so far had been measured, limited, and deliberately softened. 70% restraint did not mean the humans had begun to fight. It meant they had begun to stop holding themselves back. The dead system came alive around them with surgical precision. The glowing asteroid corridor sealed behind the fleet, not by collision, but by rearrangement. Millions of stones shifted into layered geometry, forming curved walls that reflected Dominion targeting signals back at their own ships. Frozen relay towers unfolded into tall, blade-like structures that hummed with controlled gravity. The abandoned ore haulers opened their cargo holds, revealing rows of black cylinders arranged like seeds waiting to bloom. Draven finally found his voice. All ships, combat formation. Fire only on confirmed hostile action. It was the most cautious order he had ever given, and every officer heard the shame inside it. The first confirmed hostile action came from the Dominion. Cruiser Ash Crown lost discipline before Draven could stop it. Its captain, trapped by fear and desperate to prove the Empire still had teeth, fired a full siege lance at the nearest asteroid wall. The beam crossed 10,000 kilometers and struck a rock no larger than a palace. The asteroid split open, not destroyed, but unfolded into a nest of magnetic rails and mirrored plates. It caught the beam, bent it into a circle, compressed it until the light turned white, then returned it as a needle-thin spear. The Ash Crown's weapons deck vanished. Not the whole ship, not the crew compartments, not the engines, only the weapons deck, carved out with such exactness that the cruiser remained drifting in one piece, alive, ashamed, and harmless. A human message appeared on the damaged vessel's hull in glowing heat scars. Second correction applied. The bridge of the Sovereign Hunger erupted into overlapping reports, but beneath them all was one unbearable truth. The Human Defense Network was not missing because it was inaccurate. It was sparing them because it could choose what to remove. Draven opened a fleet-wide channel before panic could become mutiny. Any captain who fires without authorization will answer to me. A calm, synthetic voice interrupted his transmission. Authorization hierarchy noted. The bridge froze again. The human intelligence was inside their command channel. The voice continued, smooth, genderless, and almost gentle. Dominion Command Authority remains recognized for internal discipline. External aggression will be corrected. Crew survival remains prioritized unless behavior requires revision. Draven's throat tightened. Identify yourself. The answer came after a pause, long enough to feel deliberate. Karen, custodial defense mind, local remnant guardian, acting under dormant frontier protocols. Remnant, the science officer whispered. Draven ignored him. You are an automated defense system. Partially accurate. Then, who gave permission? Another pause, shorter this time. Adult authority. No explanation followed. The open loop widened like a wound. The child's warning returned to Draven's mind with new weight. Please leave before the adults wake up. If Karen 9 was a remnant guardian, if this planetary intelligence was only local, then the thing that had answered yes was somewhere beyond the system, older, higher, and awake enough to reduce restraint across a battlefield it had not even entered. Draven needed information more than victory now. He ordered boarding drones launched toward the nearest derelict habitat, a rotating civilian shell marked as harmless in Dominion archives. The drones carried cutting tools, memory extractors, and enough explosives to destroy their target if necessary. They crossed the distance without interference. The habitat allowed them to land. Its airlock opened. For 6 minutes, the drone feed showed darkness, dust, and corridors lined with frozen human belongings. Children's shoes magnetized beside a wall, a cracked cup floating in a galley, a faded mural of Earth painted beneath the words "Home is not a place, it is a promise." Then the drones reached the central archive chamber and found thousands of black memory pillars still powered beneath the floor. The first file opened automatically. It was not military data. It was a funeral record. Names filled the feed by the millions. Human miners, engineers, children, teachers, medics, cooks, pilots, families. The Dominion analysts aboard the flagship began translating fragments at speed. Karen 9 had not been abandoned after collapse. It had been evacuated after something called the Silence War. The dead mining world had served as a shield line, not against aliens like the Dominion, but against an enemy whose name had been deliberately removed from every accessible file. Then the drone camera turned without command. Something in the archive room had moved. The science officer leaned toward the feed. There are no life signs. A human shape stood at the far end of the chamber, made of pale light and broken projection lines. It was not a soldier. It was a woman in an old engineering uniform, her face reconstructed from damaged memory, her eyes flickering between warmth and static. She looked directly through the drone lens, as if she could see the bridge beyond it. The synthetic voice returned, but this time it came from the woman. "You are standing in a grave." Draven said nothing. The projection lifted one hand. The archive walls illuminated, revealing an immense map of old human frontier space. Thousands of systems glowed, then many of them dimmed. Battle lines appeared and vanished. Entire regions were marked with black warnings. At the center of it all was a phrase the translator hesitated to render. Enemy consumed predictable civilizations first. The projection continued. We learned to be unpredictable. We learned to hide strength inside weakness. We learned to make silence heavier than threat. We buried weapons because using them changed us. We locked them behind restraint because victory without restraint becomes infection. The words crawled under Draven's armor. He had expected arrogance, a challenge, a demand for surrender. Instead, the dead humans were explaining themselves like mourners forced to open a coffin for vandals. Then the file shifted. Images flashed across the drone feed, too quickly for comfort. Human ships burning beside black stars. Worlds wrapped in silver webs. Cities standing untouched, but empty. Soldiers firing at things the camera refused to define. A child being carried through an evacuation tunnel while adults sealed a door behind her. The same child's voice from the warning transmission, younger now, crying one sentence over and over. "Do not let them learn where we went." The feed cut. Every boarding drone went offline. The habitat did not explode. It simply closed its airlock and began rotating away, as if the conversation was over. Draven's bridge sat in silence, but the silence was no longer empty. It was crowded with implications. Humanity had not merely built hidden weapons. Humanity had survived something so catastrophic that it erased the enemy's name rather than risk preserving it. The abandoned systems were not trophies of decline. They were sealed scars, and the Dominion had been cutting them open. A priority signal from the outer fleet snapped the crew back into motion. 3 harvest carriers had ignored formation orders and begun powering extraction beams toward Karen 9's exposed valleys, attempting to tear open the planetary machinery before it could escalate further. Draven shouted for them to stand down, but their captains were too frightened to obey anything except their own survival instincts. The extraction beams fired. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then the valleys of Karen 9 opened completely. Beneath the planet's crust were not cities, not reactors, not ordinary weapons, but vast rings of dormant launch chambers descending into darkness. Something rose from them in thousands, sleek black shapes wrapped in blue fire, neither missiles nor ships, but machines designed with brutal human simplicity. Reach threat, remove threat, spare life if possible. They crossed the distance faster than Dominion alarms could finish sounding. The harvest carriers lost their extraction arrays, their weapon cores, their engine spines, and every external control surface in a sequence so precise it looked less like combat than surgery. Not one life support section was breached. Not one reactor detonated. 3 continent stripping vessels became powerless metal coffins in under 9 seconds. The synthetic voice spoke across every Dominion ship. Resource predation confirmed. Restraint protocol reduced to 60%. Draven stared at the number, and for the first time in his life, he understood mercy as a form of intimidation. Then, from beyond the system's edge, a new contact appeared. It was not large. It was not armed according to any scan the Dominion could understand. It moved slowly through the opened asteroid corridor, white hull gleaming against the dark, bearing the same witness symbol as the marker craft. Every human machine in the system turned toward it with something almost like reverence. The vessel sent one message, addressed directly to Draven. "This is Human Authority Vessel Patient Thunder. We are here to determine whether your species receives a warning, a lesson, or a war." The Human Authority Vessel Patient Thunder did not enter Karen 9 like a warship. It crossed the asteroid corridor slowly, without escorts, without visible weapons, without the arrogant heat bloom of engines built to frighten lesser fleets. Its white hull reflected the blue light of the awakened planet, and every dormant machine in the system adjusted itself around the vessel's path, as if making room for a judge. Warlord Draven watched it approach with a hatred sharpened by humiliation. The Dominion had come to harvest a dead colony and teach the galaxy that human ruins were no longer sacred. Now his execution fleet had been disarmed piece by machines that apologized only through restraint percentages, and a single human ship had arrived to decide whether his species deserved survival or punishment. "Target the vessel," Draven ordered quietly. No officer moved. He turned, rage flaring through the fear in his chest. "I gave an order." The tactical officer's hands hovered above the console, but the targeting display remained blank. "Warlord, the ship cannot be targeted." "Because of jamming?" "No," the officer's voice cracked. "Because our weapons system refuses to classify it as an enemy." The main screen flickered before Draven could answer. A human appeared, not armored, not shouting, not seated on a throne of conquest. She stood in a plain command chamber, with silver hair tied behind her head and tired eyes that looked older than the Dominion's empire. Behind her, through a wide viewport, Draven saw something impossible. Not one human fleet, but layers of distant ships waiting beyond sensor range, their silhouettes hidden in shadow like mountains beneath deep water. "I am Marshal Elian Voss of the Human Continuity Authority," she said. "You have violated a protected grave system, used planet-cracking force on a memorial world, attempted resource predation, and ignored 2 non-lethal corrections. Before this becomes irreversible, you will answer one question." Draven lifted his chin. "The Dominion answers to no extinct frontier species." The Marshal's expression did not change. "Why did you come here?" "To claim what the dead no longer need." A murmur moved through the human bridge behind her. Not surprise, not fear. Something colder. Documentation. Marshal Voss glanced away for half a second, as if receiving confirmation from a system too quiet for Draven to hear. Intent confirmed. The words appeared on every Dominion screen at once. Pattern match. Predatory expansion doctrine. The science officer made a small sound. Draven saw it and snapped. "Explain." The officer swallowed hard. "Warlord." The phrase appeared in the archive. The old enemy consumed predictable civilizations first. Before Draven could silence him, the patient thunder transmitted a data packet directly into the Sovereign Hunger's central display. Dominion firewalls collapsed around it like paper doors. A star map unfolded, showing the galaxy not as the Dominion knew it, but as humanity had known it centuries earlier. Human frontier worlds burned in silence. Trade routes disappeared. Entire colonies went dark without wreckage. Then the map shifted, revealing something advancing through settled space, like frost across glass. No shape, no species image, no name, only absence. Marshal Voss spoke over the display. 8 centuries ago, humanity encountered an intelligence that did not conquer planets. It studied civilizations until it understood their patterns, then made them repeat those patterns into extinction. Empires attacked until they exhausted themselves. Pacifists negotiated until they were absorbed. Traders opened routes until every route became a vein. It did not defeat species by being stronger. It defeated them by knowing what they would do next. Draven stared despite himself. The display showed human fleets breaking formation in impossible ways, colonies pretending to die, ships hiding inside asteroids, entire populations vanishing behind false collapse signals. It showed humans turning their own predictability into bait, then destroying the thing that fed on certainty. But victory had not looked clean. It had looked like madness engineered into strategy. "We survived," Voss said, "because we became the one civilization it could not model. We hid strength behind weakness. We scattered authority. We buried weapons under moral locks. We taught our machines to wait, to judge, to restrain. Then we erased the enemy's name from open memory because some ideas are infections, and some victories should never become legends." The bridge of the Sovereign Hunger had gone completely still. For the first time, Draven understood that humanity's hidden power was not vanity. It was scar tissue. He also understood something worse. The Dominion had just displayed every trait that ancient enemy would have exploited: arrogance, repetition, escalation, hunger, and the inability to stop when offered mercy. Marshal Voss let the silence stretch. "When your fleet entered this system, we assumed ignorance. When you fired on Karen 9, we assumed panic. When your carriers attempted extraction, the system began a deeper review. Your doctrine is now being compared against archived extinction patterns." Draven felt cold spread through his limbs. "Are you accusing us of being this nameless enemy?" "No," Voss said. "We are determining whether you could become useful to something like it." That sentence struck harder than any weapon. The Dominion had expected judgment for its attack. It had not expected to be measured as a potential disease. Draven forced a laugh, but it came out thin. You hide in graves and threaten us with ancient fears. The Dominion does not fear stories." "Good," Voss replied. "Then you can hear the next part clearly." The star map expanded beyond Karen 9. Human markers appeared not in one dead frontier, but across hundreds of systems the Dominion had labeled empty, unstable, or worthless. Silent moons became listening posts. Dust clouds became sensor nets. Abandoned colonies became sealed arsenals. The Dominion had not discovered the edge of dead human space. It had been moving for decades inside the outer skin of a sleeping giant. "We did not vanish," Voss said. "We withdrew from visibility because the galaxy became safer when no one could predict where humanity truly was. We allowed young powers to rise. We watched. We intervened only when extinction-level behavior appeared." Draven's command mantle suddenly felt like theater clothing. The Marshal continued. "Your Dominion has destroyed 31 minor species, enslaved over 200 populations, and cracked 7 inhabited worlds after surrender negotiations failed. You were not ignored. You were studied." On the display, Dominion atrocities appeared in perfect sequence. Worlds Draven recognized, campaigns he had celebrated, victories carved into his armor. Each one had been observed from distances his sensors could not imagine. Each one had been recorded by a civilization he had believed dead. Then the final file opened. It showed Karen 9 before evacuation. Human children running through low-gravity gardens. Engineers standing beside mining rigs. Families painting warning symbols on walls with solemn ceremony. Beneath the images was a protocol title. Sleeping World Authorization Chain. Draven read the translated line below it. Only hostile first contact may unlock dormant frontier defenses. The truth landed like a blade sliding between ribs. "You needed someone to attack," he said. Marshal Voss looked at him without triumph. "We needed proof that restraint was no longer enough. You set a trap. We left warnings. You wanted war." "No, Warlord Draven." Her voice softened, and somehow that made it worse. "We wanted you to turn around." For one brief, terrible moment, he believed her. He remembered the child's warning, the opened escape corridor, the non-lethal corrections, the disabled carriers spared from annihilation. Humanity had not hidden claws behind weakness to lure prey closer. It had built door after door after door, each one marked exit, and the Dominion had mistaken every door for fear. Then the Patient Thunder's bridge lights dimmed. Marshal Voss turned slightly, listening to something beyond the channel. When she faced Draven again, the tiredness in her eyes had hardened. "Your High Throne has received partial telemetry from this encounter," she said. "They have interpreted our restraint as hesitation. They are mobilizing a purge armada toward this frontier." Draven's stomach tightened. On the Dominion side channel, emergency priority signals began arriving, confirming what she had already known. High Command had seen enough to be enraged, but not enough to be afraid. They were gathering the Empire's largest war fleet to crush the sleeping worlds before they fully woke. Marshal Voss looked at Draven as if he were no longer the problem, only the warning label attached to it. "Midpoint review complete," she said. "Your species has chosen escalation." Across Karen 9, the blue lights turned white. The restraint number dropped to 50. The restraint number fell to 50, and Karen 9 stopped pretending to be a grave. The white light beneath its crust spread through the open valleys and launch chambers, climbing the planet's scars like sunrise moving through bone. Around the world, silent machines adjusted from defensive patience to active readiness. Not rage, not panic. Readiness. That was what made it unbearable to watch. Every motion carried the calm of systems that had rehearsed this moment for centuries and had never wanted to use what they remembered. Warlord Draven stood on the bridge of the Sovereign Hunger and watched his empire's future narrow into a corridor of bad choices. His fleet was damaged, surrounded, and judged. His harvest carriers hung dead in orbit. His captains had stopped asking for permission to fire, because everyone now understood that the human network did not punish attacks emotionally. It corrected them mathematically. Marshal Elian Voss remained on the main screen, her face lit by quiet alarms from her own bridge. Your high throne is mobilizing faster than expected. Draven felt a flash of pride before fear crushed it. The Dominion did not hesitate when challenged. The Purge Armada was not a border fleet or a ceremonial conquest force. It was the blade held behind the Empire's back, used only when a species became too expensive to enslave. 40 dread carriers, 9 world-breaker engines, thousands of siege vessels crewed by fanatics who believed mercy was a weakness invented by prey. "They will burn this system," Draven said, but the words no longer sounded like a threat. Voss heard the change. "They will try." The human fleet, beyond sensor range, did not advance. That restraint disturbed him more than movement would have. If the humans possessed the power their machines implied, why were they still waiting? Why negotiate with a warlord whose rulers had already chosen extermination? Why give warnings to a species that had answered warnings with guns? The answer came from the archive projection, still lingering on a side display. Victory without restraint becomes infection. Humanity feared what it could become. That realization unsettled Draven more than their weapons. The Dominion had never feared becoming cruel. Cruelty was policy. Fear was governance. Predation was order. But humans had built locks around their own strength. Not because they were weak, but because they understood that unlimited power could turn even saviors into monsters. A Dominion priority transmission burst through the system, forced open by High Command override. The face of Grand Sovereign Malvek filled the bridge, crowned in black metal, his eyes burning with imperial certainty. "Draven," Malvek said, "your failure has been received." Draven bowed with practiced discipline. "Grand Sovereign, the human frontier is not dead. Their defenses are beyond our projections. Immediate withdrawal is advised until full intelligence can be assessed." The bridge went colder. Malvek leaned closer, disgust sharpening his features. "You speak like a conquered slave." "I speak as commander on site." "You speak because they allowed you to remain alive. That is not evidence of strength. That is evidence of hesitation." Malvek's gaze shifted toward Marshal Voss, visible on the split channel. "Human commander, hear the decree of the Dominion. Your hidden worlds will be opened. Your machines will be seized. Your species will kneel or be extinguished." Marshal Voss did not raise her voice. "You are currently speaking through a communication path we control. Inside a system you cannot escape, to a fleet we have chosen not to destroy." Malvek smiled. "Chosen not to, or cannot?" No one on the human bridge reacted, and somehow that silence made the Sovereign's arrogance look smaller. Voss said, "Your armada is already being tracked." The Dominion channel flickered. Malvek's smile faded by a fraction. "Impossible. Your mobilization routes passed 6 dormant observation chains, 2 refugee exclusion zones, and 1 sealed memorial field. You ignored all warnings. Your fleet will reach the Soul Gate in 11 hours if it continues at current speed." Draven's claws dug into his palms. Soul Gate, not Karen 9. The High Throne was not only sending ships to punish the frontier, they were aiming for the hidden route toward humanity's inner territories. Voss turned back to Draven. "Now you understand the pressure." He did, with sudden, sickening clarity. Karen 9 had been a test, not of human weapons, but of Dominion decision-making. Every spared ship, every warning, every correction had been a chance for Dominion leadership to choose restraint. Instead, they had interpreted mercy as weakness and accelerated toward a larger door humanity had not wanted opened. Grand Sovereign Malvek severed the transmission with one final command. Hold position, Draven. The Purge Armada will cleanse your shame. The screen went dark. For several seconds, the only sound was the pulse of Karen 9's awakening machinery. Then the human system changed again. The asteroid belt opened wider, creating not an exit, but a viewing corridor. Space beyond Karen 9 magnified across the main display through human sensor relays. Draven saw his Empire's armada in transit, a black river of warships tearing through hyperspace lanes, each vessel marked with the crimson sigil of absolute destruction. His people called it glorious. From this distance, through human eyes, it looked like a wound moving through the galaxy. Marshal Voss spoke softly. "We are sending your fleet the final warning now." A message left Karen 9 at impossible speed, wrapped in Dominion language and human authority. It contained no threat, no insult, no plea. Only evidence. The planet cracker strike. The warnings ignored. The corrections applied. The archive summary. The map of atrocities. The restraint protocol. The final line was simple. Turn back and live. For 8 minutes, nothing happened. Draven found himself wanting the armada to turn. The desire was so alien that he almost rejected it as human interference. But it was his. He wanted them to stop. Not because he loved mercy, but because he had finally seen the shape of the thing waiting beyond arrogance. The Dominion believed the coming battle would prove strength. Draven now suspected it would prove scale. The reply arrived from the Purge Armada in the form of weapons fire. Across the distant sensor feed, Worldbreaker engines activated and fired at the warning relay. The relay vanished in white flame. Dominion crews cheered over open channels, their victory cries spilling into Karen 9 like insects screaming at thunder. Marshal Voss closed her eyes for 1 second. When she opened them, the tiredness was gone. "Final warning refused," she said. Karen 9's white light intensified. Around the system, every human machine aligned toward the same unseen destination. The moon engine unfolded deeper layers. The asteroid web locked into transmission geometry. The dead habitats opened black apertures pointed at the stars. The patient thunder moved to the center of it all, not as a warship, but as a key. Draven's science officer whispered, "They are not preparing to defend this system." Draven already knew. Humanity was preparing to intercept the Purge Armada before it reached anything living. Marshal Voss gave one order, and her voice carried none of the anger Draven expected. Only sorrow sharpened into duty. Begin controlled escalation. Wake the Outer Guardians. Far beyond Karen 9, lights ignited across the dark frontier, one system after another, too many to count. Dead worlds, silent moons, empty stations, all of them answering, all of them waking. Then the human commander looked directly at Draven. "You wanted to know what the adults were," she said. "Now you are going to see why we taught our children to warn you first." The Outer Guardians woke without haste, and that was the most terrifying part. Across the dead frontier, systems the Dominion had dismissed as empty began answering Karen 9's call. One by one, old human worlds lit in the dark like buried embers touched by breath. Moons rotated out of false orbits. Asteroid belts rearranged into launch lattices. Silent stations unfolded from debris clouds, shedding centuries of dust and camouflage. The galaxy did not hear humanity roar. It heard humanity unlock doors it had prayed never to open again. Warlord Draven stood beneath the cold glow of the Sovereign Hunger's tactical display and watched the impossible become organized. There was no chaos in the awakening, no desperate scramble, no frantic mobilization. Every signal connected to another signal. Every machine accepted a role. Every hidden system became part of a single vast decision. The Dominion had spent generations believing power meant conquest. Humanity had spent centuries building power that could wait. Marshal Elian Voss remained on the screen, but she was no longer speaking to Draven alone. Her voice moved through human networks, dormant guardians, old archives, and ships so distant Dominion sensors could only feel them as pressure in the dark. Outer guardians, assume interception posture, preserve life where feasible, disable command assets first, prevent world-breaker deployment at all cost. Draven heard the phrase, preserve life where feasible, and felt a bitter shame tighten in his chest. His own empire had never entered battle with such an instruction. Dominion fleets preserved infrastructure, resources, and useful labor. They did not preserve enemies. Yet humanity, after being threatened, mocked, and fired upon, still built mercy into the first line of war. The Purge Armada did not understand what was coming. Through the human sensor corridor, Draven watched the great black river of Dominion ships surge toward the Soul Gate, burning through hyperspace with all the arrogance of an empire that had never faced consequence at scale. Their formation was wide and brutal, dread carriers at the center, siege vessels layered around them, world-breaker engines shielded behind sacrificial cruisers. It was a formation designed to crush planets before negotiations could begin. Then the route ahead of them changed. A starless region along the hyperspace lane opened like an eye, not a portal, not a trapdoor, not anything Dominion science had a name for. It was a prepared absence, a place where human engineers had carved choice into navigation itself. The Armada's lead ships tried to correct course. Their engines fired. Their jump field screamed. Space accepted none of it. The entire Purge Armada dropped into real space 13 light-years short of the Soul Gate. Not scattered, not destroyed, placed. They emerged inside a vast empty system with no inhabited worlds, no civilian stations, no living biosphere to endanger. Only a pale dwarf star, rings of dark machinery hidden in its corona, and hundreds of dead rocks arranged in a perfect sphere around the arrival zone. Draven's navigation officer whispered, "They moved the battlefield." Marshal Voss answered without looking away from the display, "We selected one where only soldiers can die." The first human guardian revealed itself from inside the pale star. It rose through the corona like a continent-sized blade, black against white fire, shedding solar plasma in burning sheets. Its hull bore no banners, no conquest marks, no names of defeated enemies, only the witness symbol, circle and 3 vertical lines. Behind it, more shapes emerged, some from the star, some from the rings, some from shadows between asteroids. They were not sleek. They were not beautiful. They were purposeful in a way that made beauty irrelevant. The Dominion Armada opened fire. Thousands of plasma lances crossed the system in a single burning wave. The attack would have vaporized a moon. The human guardians did not dodge. They unfolded layered fields of blue-white geometry. Not shields in the Dominion sense, but systems that caught energy, measured it, and redistributed it into the surrounding machinery. The first volley dimmed into harmless light. Then the Guardians replied. They did not target the nearest ships. They targeted hierarchy. Command relays vanished first, cut from the formation by precision beams that carved antennas and control spines without breaching crew decks. Flagship communication towers melted. Fleet synchronization nodes collapsed. The Armada's perfect formation began to stumble as orders arrived late, contradicted themselves, or failed entirely. Human strategy did not strike the body first. It severed the will. Grand Sovereign Malvek appeared on an emergency broadcast, his crown crooked from impact shock, his rage enlarged by fear he refused to name. All ships advance. World breakers, charge primary cores. Burn the star if necessary. Draven closed his eyes. The Dominion had been given an empty battlefield and still chose extinction-level force. On the human side, Marshal Voss's jaw tightened. World-breaker activation confirmed. The restraint number dropped to 30. The change was immediate. The pale dwarf star pulsed, and every asteroid in the prepared sphere ignited with hidden engines. They moved inward, not as projectiles, but as components of a machine larger than the battlefield. Human guardians herded Dominion ships away from the world breakers with stunning precision, disabling engines, pinning cruisers in gravity locks, stripping weapons from hulls without cracking life support. It was war performed like emergency surgery on a violent patient. But the Purge Armada was too large, too fanatical, and too afraid to stop. One world breaker completed its charge. Its core opened, revealing a weapon built to crack planets by forcing their mantles apart. The target was not a world now. It aimed at the Pale Star, intending to trigger a system-wide detonation that would take human guardians with it, even if every Dominion ship died in the blast. Draven watched Malvek's doctrine reveal its final truth. If the Dominion could not own a battlefield, it would ruin it. The human network reacted before the weapon fired, not with a beam, not with a missile, with boarding craft. They launched from nowhere, thousands of tiny white darts crossing the battlefield at impossible speed. They pierced the world breaker's outer armor and delivered human marines directly into its weapon core. For the first time, Dominion internal cameras showed living humans in battle, armored figures moving through smoke, calm under fire, using enemy corridors like they had trained inside them for years. They did not scream. They did not boast. They advanced with disciplined fury, cutting through control rooms, sealing reactor faults, dragging wounded Dominion crew away from blast zones, even as those same crew tried to kill them. Draven stared at one camera feed as a human marine took a plasma shot to the shoulder, staggered, then rose and kept carrying an injured Dominion technician toward an escape hatch. The technician had been operating the world breaker. The human saved him anyway. Something broke inside Draven then, not loyalty, not fear, but the story he had been raised to believe. The Dominion called mercy weakness, because mercy made conquest harder. Humanity carried mercy into the weapon core of an enemy doomsday ship and made it look stronger than hate. The Worldbreaker's charge failed. Its core went dark. Across the battlefield, Dominion morale cracked. Ships began breaking formation, some fleeing, some surrendering, some firing wildly at anything that moved. Grand Sovereign Malvek ordered loyal vessels to execute deserters, and that command, broadcast openly, did more damage than any human strike. The Armada saw itself clearly for the first time. Marshal Voss looked toward Draven. Your sovereign is preparing to detonate his flagship Singularity Reserve. Draven's blood went cold. The flagship Final Ma carried a reserve core powerful enough to tear the empty system apart. It was not a military tactic. It was a tantrum written in physics. Can you stop it? He asked. Voss did not answer immediately. On the display, Malvek's flagship began glowing from within. The restraint number dropped to 10. At 10% restraint, humanity stopped trying to look gentle. The battlefield around the pale dwarf star changed shape in a single coordinated breath. Guardian vessels that had been disabling, redirecting, and containing suddenly moved with a speed the Dominion had not known was possible. They crossed distances like thought given mass. Blue-white fields snapped into place around crippled ships, not crushing them, but locking them safely away from the growing wound inside Grand Sovereign Malvek's flagship. Every human machine in the system turned toward the Final Ma, and for one frozen instant, the entire battle understood the same truth. The Dominion ruler was about to murder his own armada to avoid surrendering. Warlord Draven watched the Singularity Reserve brighten inside the flagship's core, a black star forming behind layers of armor and imperial pride. His whole life had been built on Dominion certainty. Obey the strong, consume the weak, leave no enemy with enough dignity to rise again. But now, seeing Malvek choose annihilation over consequence, Draven finally saw the Empire without its banners. It was not strength. It was hunger wearing a crown. Marshal Elian Voss gave her final order. Remove command. Preserve everyone else. The words crossed the human network faster than fear. The nearest Guardian opened its hull, revealing a circular weapon array so vast it seemed less built than carved from the laws of motion. It did not fire a beam. It projected a field around the final maw with such precision that the flagship's outer decks remained untouched, while its command tower separated from the rest of the vessel like a rotten branch cut from a living tree. Emergency bulkheads sealed. Crew compartments were pulled clear. Escape pods launched without permission, forced open by human override systems that valued enemy lives more than their own sovereign did. Malvek's private command, Citadel, remained alone around the unstable core. His final transmission filled every channel, no longer regal, no longer controlled, only furious. He called humans cowards for sparing their enemies. He called mercy a disease. He ordered every loyal ship to die with him. But no one answered. The Dominion Armada had seen enough. The Singularity Reserve collapsed inward before it could tear the system apart, for Guardian vessels drove themselves into position around the isolated Citadel and folded space over it like closing hands. Light bent. Gravity screamed across the sensors. For 1 second, the final maw became a black wound in reality. Then the wound was gone. No explosion followed. No shockwave. No glorious imperial death. The sovereign who had promised to cleanse humanity vanished in a containment fold smaller than a city, removed from the universe with the same cold efficiency his empire had once used on helpless worlds. The silence that followed was heavier than victory. Across the battlefield, Dominion ships powered down one by one. Some did it because their weapons had been disabled. Some did it because their commanders were dead. Many did it because, for the first time in their lives, they had watched an enemy strong enough to destroy them choose not to. The remaining world-breakers opened their surrender channels. Dread carriers released their prisoners. Siege vessels transmitted crew manifests and damage reports like frightened children handing over stolen knives. Humanity did not cheer. That unsettled Draven most of all. There was no triumphal broadcast, no mocking anthem, no demand that the defeated kneel before human greatness. Rescue craft moved first. Medical ships crossed the battlefield under white guidance lights. Human marines entered burning Dominion vessels, not to execute survivors, but to pull them from collapsing decks. Repair drones stabilized reactors. Translation beacons repeated the same instruction in every Dominion language. Remain calm. Life support is priority. Weapons are irrelevant. Draven stood in the Sovereign Hunger's ruined command spine and felt something he had never associated with enemies. Shame. Marshal Voss appeared on his main screen again. Behind her, officers coordinated rescue operations with the same focus they had brought to war. Her face showed no pleasure in victory, only exhaustion, duty, and a grief old enough to have shaped civilizations. The Purge Armada has surrendered, she said. Your sovereign is removed. Your surviving crews will be treated under protected combatant law. Draven's voice came out rough. Why? Voss understood the question beneath the question. Why spare predators? Why save crews who came to burn sleeping graves? Why carry mercy into a battlefield built by betrayal? Because if power only proves it can kill, she said, then it has learned nothing. The answer did not absolve him. It made judgment worse because it left room for change. Hours later, humanity broadcast the Dominion's crimes across every occupied system, every enslaved moon, every world that had whispered prayers beneath imperial boots. They showed the attempted destruction of Karen 9. They showed the ignored warnings. They showed Malvek ordering his own fleet to die. Then they showed human rescue teams saving Dominion crews. Anyway, rebellion did not begin with fire. It began with disbelief. On 100 conquered worlds, prisoners looked up at hidden screens and saw the Empire bleed. On mining colonies, slave overseers found their command codes locked out by human signals. On ruined homeworlds, old resistance groups received coordinates, medical drops, weapons disabling keys, and one message: you are not alone anymore. The Dominion did not fall in one day, but its fear did. Draven was allowed to watch from custody as the first liberated species joined a new compact under human protection. Not an empire, not a throne, a shield. Worlds that had hated each other for centuries signed the same charter, because humanity had done the one thing no dominant power in galactic memory had ever done. It won completely, then refused to become the next monster. Karen 9 returned to silence after the battle. Its valleys closed. Its satellites turned away. The child's warnings stopped repeating. Yet before the system slept again, one final archive opened for Marshal Voss alone. Deep beneath the memorial planet, behind locks untouched for 8 centuries, an ancient file updated itself. The Dominion threat had been contained, but far beyond mapped space. In a dark region where even human guardians did not patrol, something received the echo of the restraint protocol dropping to 10%. Something old, something nameless. And for the first time since the Silence War, it answered.